Well, season's greetings and happy end of the year and happy new year to everybody out there in listener land. And welcome to the latest edition of the Entheogenic Evolution podcast. As always, I'm your host, Martin, and I'm happy to have you with me today with this final episode for 2021, which has proven to be another very interesting and tumultuous year. Had a lot of great interviews here on the podcast. Also had some drama going back to symposia and all the crap that they were flowing around. And boy, it's just been quite a year, hasn't it? And here we are again with the Omicron variant and people's travels being disrupted and everything. It's been something else, but I hope that you have been enjoying the podcast throughout this year and gotten something from all the many great conversations that have taken place here on the podcast. And just thank you for listening. And boy, started this in 2008 now, and we're going to be going into 2022. So that's a lot of years. That's a lot of interviews. That's a lot of talks. That's a lot of people here on the podcast, and hopefully more to come. To wrap it up this year, I decided to reach out to a 5-MeO practitioner in Iceland, Nyx, and we actually had a very long conversation, but we never really got to the point of talking about how she facilitates 5-MeO because we spent so much time talking about her experience of being transgender and how her own experiences with psychedelics fit into her decision to transition. And so it's a very interesting conversation. It's an extremely personal conversation. And it's a little bit long. We talked for about 2 hours and decided that we'll have to have Nyx back on another time to actually talk about her method of facilitation. So we'll get to that. But in the meantime, this is a very personal, very intimate conversation about Nyx and her sense of self. And so I think it's going to be quite interesting for all of you. It's about 2 hours long. You might want to break it up into a couple different listens, but that's what we've got for you today here on the final episode of 2021 of the Entheogenic Evolution podcast. It is the holidays, and I have made my album Finding Life After Love available for free download here over the holiday season. It's over at my Bandcamp page at martinball.bandcamp.com. And you can also find the album on my personal webpage, martinball.net. And it's available for free downloads if you'd like to grab it. I invite you to please go ahead and do so. It'll be free for the next week or so. And when you download, you just enter 0 when it asks you, how much do you want to pay? You just enter 0 and it's yours for free. Of course, moving into 2022, I am available for non-dual entheogenic integration consultation calls, 30, 60, and 90 minutes. You can go to nondualentheogenicintegration.com if you want more details. And of course, still got my Patreon going if you'd like to support me and my work and also the podcast by joining up as a member of Patreon. Just go over to patreon.com/martinwball. And if you'd like to make a PayPal donation in support of the podcast, just go to martinball.net and use the PayPal link at the top right of the page. Well, I hope that the year is winding up good for you and yours and your loved ones and your family and your immediate circle. And I hope you're staying safe and healthy, and wish you all the best for the coming year. And let's see what happens together, shall we? Well, here's my conversation with Nyx. Please enjoy. Sit back, have a cup of cocoa if you're in the Northern Hemisphere. If you're in the Southern Hemisphere, have a lemonade, or I don't know what you drink down there, but anyway. Please enjoy, and I'll talk to you next year. Bye. Well, then I'll just go ahead and get us started. And I would just like you to invite you to first sort of introduce yourself. So I'll just tell the listening audience that we're talking to Nyx. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Nyx?
Yeah, Nyx.
Okay. We're talking to Nyx way over in Iceland. And I think this is probably the first interview that I've ever done with anybody who's actually in Iceland. And I always get excited when I think about Iceland because, you know, as Helgi knows, who's, you know, in the background there, I'd really love to get there to take some photographs because it's just such a beautiful, beautiful place.
Hmm.
I just love all the photos I always see from Iceland. Um, and I'm having you on because you seem like you're an interesting character, and I think you've got an interesting story to tell. And you're also working with the medicines over there in Iceland, particularly working with like MDMA and 5-MeO DMT, and we're going to talk all about that. But let's just start by getting to know Nyx, and I invite you to share some of your personal story, which I was just reading through the other day, which I think is very interesting, and would invite you to share any aspect of that that you would like to share with the listening audience that you're comfortable with.
It's quite a hard question, no? Like to define ourselves with words.
Yeah.
um, but when it's about my history, the same now. How I can actually, um, I think it's more about what I want to share more than what I can say, because there's so many ways I can talk about myself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think what I want to share, what I want to start, maybe is probably um, by the type of childhood I had.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my my father was alcoholic, and I was really little when I got abused multiple times from him. Um, I don't know exactly why, but he was not seeing me as her daughter. Well, at the time they were thinking that I was their son because I'm transgender also. um, but it's just that he was not able to recognize me, and precisely because of that he had three attempts to kill me when I was a child. Um,
At what age? How old were you?
I remember that the first time it was around when I was around 4 years old. The next time it happened like around 7 years old, and I think the next one was like at around 12 or 13. I'm now 29 years old at this moment. Um, so in one side was that, and another side was the bully I was receiving at the school, not only for being autistic, being transgender, also uh, having also a lot of dysphoria, but also the way I was speaking, the way I was relating with others, I was really aware. Uh, I have memories of when I was 7 years old that I was super aware of my own awareness. One of the reasons I believe this was happening, it was because I was suffering so much in my life when I was a child
Mm-hmm.
that I was need to distance myself from the history that, that this character was living, and that actually allowed me when I was really child to see that I was this present moment. Of course, I was identifying myself at the time with with my ego too, and with the voice, no, that I can have in my head with it. Um, but I remember around 12 years old, really asking to myself, like, why I am here exactly in this moment in this life, why I'm seeing through this body in this precise moment, and trying from my ego to try to figure out, just from logic, um, what was going on. And I remember to have pretty nice conclusions at that age. I was just understanding that if I was in this present moment, uh, at the time, like the way that I just put logic into this, okay, it's not
Mm-hmm.
something I see it this way, but at the time, I was like, if I am in this present moment, it's because what happened in the past. But if something happened in the past that allowed me to be here, that means that somehow it was writing, or just that was my thoughts at that age. Okay, and then what actually means that suddenly I'm observing through this perspective, and then like the conclusion I was getting at the time when I was a child, I was like, well, probably it's because it can be pretty interesting life here. It can be really interesting perspective to take, because why, if not, I'm going through all this shit, so that actually allowed me to have this perspective at the time of, hey, if I am going through so many suffer, it's just because something really interesting is going to happen, and it's worth it. Because if not, why to be alive now? If it's not for exploring. So
you say you were around 12 that you were developing this perspective?
yes.
So, I mean, so this is just really quite fascinating, because here you're coming from abusive parenting, and I want to get back into the transgender issue shortly, because I think that that's a really interesting subject to kind of dive into a little bit more. But so around 12 years old, I mean, there's the potential for anyone who's going through the level of trauma that you had been through, that someone could, somewhat similar to what you're describing, people can disassociate, right? Where their traumatic situation is just so challenging that they completely disassociate from it and removing their perspective from their lived experience. But you're doing it more in an observational way, in a self-reflective way that is not disassociating. Maybe we could say it's detaching from the suffering, but it's not disassociating from reality. And that's one of the great dangers of people who suffer from trauma, is the disassociation and becoming the deadening of the senses, the deadening of the lived experience in order to remove themselves to a protected, safe place. But you're observing this and then choosing to live and choosing to actually appreciate what it is that you had gone through and how it's developing you as a person. Some of us are just more naturally inclined to self-reflection at that level. But do you feel there was an influence that brought you to that, or do you just feel that this is your sort of natural inquiring mode? I'm just wondering what thoughts you have on that, because I do think it's a successful way of dealing with the trauma of existence.
I think it was two really big influences to this to happen. One, it was a dream that I had around 7 years old, where I saw in my computer that everyone that I know and the full reality was just my own program, that it was just something that I just made. And it was so obvious in the dream. I was just seeing it really, really clear. And I was feeling so much alone, seeing this, and I was so scared that I remember in the dream, I went to bed because the dream was happening in my room. And then I just lie down in the bed, and I thought, I don't care if this was real or not. I just don't want to know. That was what I thought at the moment. But anyway, it was so, after having that dream, it just permanently been there, and I was really, really scared for a long time in my life about accepting this as a possibility. And also, I believe that it was also that my father was playing always a lot of video games when I was a child. And And he a lot of times it was insisting to me about how this reality is just a game.
Mm.
Um, so I think that also had a strong influence in this perspective. I believe so.
Well, it's interesting that the influence that you're identifying here is coming from the person who was abusing you and the person who, as you say, actually tried to kill you.
Yes.
I'm just curious, how do you feel about that? And did that play a role in the dream itself in the moment that you described it as scary? So here your father is kind of modeling not only gaming, but also viewing reality as like a game, that it's all a game that
Mm-hmm.
we're playing. And that this is coming into your dream. And in your dream, you're in your room. I mean, and then you're going to bed in the dream. I mean, it's just so fascinating. I love the different levels of dreams. I often have multi-level dreams where I'm having a dream and then I wake up from the dream in the dream and I think about, oh, I really got to tell my wife about this dream because that's such a fascinating dream. And then I realize, wait, no, I'm still dreaming, you know? So I have these multiple levels, kind of like what you're describing here. But it's such an interesting mix that here, sort of from the person who is the abuser, that you're actually maybe learning something that's quite profound, yet
Mm-hmm.
accidentally.
Well, I don't know if it was accidentally because I have memory that since I was really, really child, like since I have the first memories, um, I was having something really clear in myself. I don't know how this happened, but it was just a realization really clear that I feel like I just came with it, and no one, I don't have anyone in my family that have this perspective of this vision. It's just about how fear is or cage, and how fear is building all the time walls against
Mm-hmm.
uh, how the only way to liberate yourself of the cage of the fear is going through instead of running away from it.
Yeah.
And I was having this super clear since I have memory of it. So that actually, when this was happening, even when my father was abusing me multiple times, I was just looking at the situation in the same moment that was happening, and I was just thinking, how if I will be him, I will do it in a better way. And I was really trying to learn. And I had a memory of, wow, I'm thinking this with 5 years old. How, wow, just wow. I remember of surprising myself with that age of
Yeah.
just thinking. Um, so what I can say, I think in general also dreams are really interesting. And now that you're mentioning, there's one question I want to ask you. And can you shape shift yourself when you're dreaming?
I'm sorry. Ask the question again.
Can you change your form to other beings, to other animals, when you're dreaming, or are you always in this body in your dreams?
You know, honestly, I think that that is mostly an answer that is kind of, or a question that is relatively unclear to me because I think that most of the times in my dreams, I'm just experiencing myself as a perspective and I don't really see or notice my body in any
Mm-hmm.
way. Though, when when I'm aware that I'm dreaming, I almost universally fly. It's something I like to do. You know, if I'm like, oh, wait, this is a dream. And then it's a very interesting physical sensation because it's this whole thought of, okay, I really have to think myself into flying. And then I can feel myself lifting up so I can feel my body. But I don't think I've ever really experienced, at least not consciously, as shifting into a different form. I always seem to be
Mm-hmm.
me, though I will say it's quite common in my dreams where I will see someone that does not look at all like a person that I know, but I recognize that strange looking person as the person that I know. And sometimes it also happens with animals and things like that, where, you know, like my dog Moxie might be a pig in the dream, but I know it's Moxie, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't do a lot of shape shifting that I personally am aware of within my dreams. Yourself, do you like to change form? Is that something that you engage
I,
in?
I just love it. Maybe that's the reason I'm also trans, But no, I really like it. It's two things that I do a lot in my dreams. One is shape-shifting into other animals, other forms, alien or whatever. And the other thing is time traveling. I also had a lot of experiences in my dreams. Actually, sometimes it's so weird because I am dreaming about my future life and then I time traveling backwards and then I wake up here and it's like, what the fuck?
So it sounds like the dream space is an important space for you.
Yeah, it's important.
Do you find that you have many of the same themes in your dreams now that you did when you were younger?
I recognize that through the work I did with DMT. It opened a lot my capacity to remember really weird things. For example, well, maybe this is not so weird, but sometimes happen that I'm seeing a series or a film that doesn't exist, and I ended with the subtitles, or I'm playing a video game, or I'm just having a dream and I pause the dream, and I just no, I want to load back to change something. I didn't like the result. So yeah, I guess now I have a lot more capacity to recall dreams. But I also remember reading some of dreams that I wrote when I was a child, and now came to my mind one that I was when I was 14, and I remember myself as an entire civilization. And I was just the entire civilization that was going through colonize another planet, and I was all of them at the same time, including the ship itself. And I have that written when I was 14, and it's like, wow, actually, like I was experiencing all the ways, all the forms, even in that age. It's just that I don't have so much memory now about it.
Yeah, but you wrote it down, so you kept a dream journal.
Yeah, a little bit. It's not a lot. I was not putting a lot of effort at the time, but I have some, yes.
Okay. So, were you raised in Spain?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I was raised in Madrid, actually, the capital.
So, when did you know that being trans was your identity? When did that first start to dawn within you and to feel the disjuncture between your personal identity and your physical being that you had been born into?
It's a really it's okay. So I know that it was at 3 years old at least, because my older sister told me that at that age I was telling to my parents and to her that I was not a guy, I was not a boy, I was a girl. But I don't have memory of it. I just know by what she told me about. And one of the things I experienced about dysphoria, and then I found this quite interesting, is that it doesn't matter how much work I put into loving myself, because it's not related at all with that. It's actually more like an it's self-immune. When your own system doesn't recognize a part of itself and it's attacking that part. But in my case, with my nervous system, I will say that doesn't recognize itself. And I really try to track where this is coming from. And one of the things I discover is that I have Morris syndrome and chimerism. And that means that when I was in the belly of my mom, it was probably another baby that fused with me. Yes. So that is probably a reason that I have here in my mouth, like two, I don't know the remember of this thing that is,
Oh, the tonsils. Yeah.
Yeah, I have two. I have also 7.5 wisdom tooths. And then through my rectal, I have another hole that is connected to, what is the name of this? Through uterus tissue. So when I started with hormones, I started to bleed every month.
Wow. So you really have the combination of two different beings in one. And it sounds like in a rather elaborate way that I watched something or I read something that apparently many of us have an absorbed twin inside our bodies. That's actually something that's very normal that happens. Um, but it sounds like you actually integrated maybe later. Maybe there was a bit more development first, and then the integration happens. So you are kind of living with two different sets of identities within you, and you have some duplicated organs and duplicated structural features. I mean, it's fascinating. It's really, really fascinating. And I mean, I suppose there's the possibility that you could have come out as a hermaphrodite if it had gone further. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a biologist. I don't know what happens, how these things develop. But I mean, it's just so curious that, when we talk about the individual, and then having learned that actually many of us have absorbed a twin, and that even sometimes it's to the point where I read this story about this woman who had children, and it was determined through a genetic test that the children weren't hers because she had a different set of DNA in her uterus. And it was because of one of these absorbed twins. And so that when the genetic testing was done, that said that no, these aren't actually your kids. But she's like, well, they gestated inside me and came out of me, so they're obviously mine. But it's we have these simple binary ideas of person, man, woman, but it's actually much more complex than that. And just not even at the psychological level, but just at the biological level of who we actually are as a being. And then if we get down into like the mitochondria and stuff like that, that we actually have billions of different beings living inside us, all kind of collectively together that says, hi, I'm Martin. Hi, I'm Nyx. But anyway, I'm interrupting your story.
Oh,
So you were talking about this with your family even before you are personally aware of it, right? Going back to 3 years old. Um,
yes.
do you feel that played a role in your father's treatment of you?
Probably yes. I mean, this didn't happen to my father, to the other two children that he had. I think probably it's because also, as my parents told me when I was a baby, I was okay. So this is okay. So my grandmother, she was always joking that I was an alien, because the way that I looked when I was a baby, um, and and then when I was also one of the things that happened is that I didn't cry when I born.
Mm.
Babies cry when they born, but I know that they were sometimes a little scared that I was looking to places and interacted with things around me that they were not able to see
Mm.
when I was also so little. So I believe that this had some influence probably about not they didn't recognize exactly that I was, I mean, my father, that I was not um, his children.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting how you yourself felt that way as like maybe an alien. And it actually just popped into my mind. I remember when I was really young, I don't even know how old I was, but I had a dream that because I also, as a child, I just felt that I was kind of different from other people. Just from my earliest memories, I always felt that I was just somewhat different, but couldn't really identify how or why. And I'd had a dream that I was an alien and I flew a little spaceship into my mom. And then I told my mom, I said, "Oh, mom, actually, I'm an alien and I implanted myself inside you." She probably doesn't remember that, so I can't ask her like, "What did you think of that?" But I was just a little kid, and I told her that. It's like, yeah, I think I put myself in there, and I had this little tiny spaceship, and I flew into my mom's anatomy, so it just felt a little bit similar. And actually, when I was a kid, I had a number of quote unquote imaginary friends that I would play with and interact with. And I had this little dragon, and one day I woke up and I just knew that my dragon was gone, and I was just bawling, just crying, crying, crying. And my dad came back into my room and he's like, "What's wrong? The son's waking up having a crying fit." And I was like, "Well, my dragon's gone." And my dad went and found that there was a little stuffed animal or plastic toy somewhere in the house that was a dragon. He's like, "No, here's your dragon right here." It's like, "That's not my dragon. It's not the real one." And that friend, that imaginary friend, was just gone. It was just when I woke up. It's like it was supposed to be there, but it was gone. And I had some others, but so who did you used to play with? What were your imaginary friends or these unseen?
It's so interesting that you say this about the spaceship like going into the belly of your mom and burning through, because actually when I was starting to work with DMT on myself, um, uh, the first breakthrough I had, apart of changing completely my perspective of my life and reality and everything, what I found myself, it was in a really stable room, and then I started to explore and to connect deeply with what was there, and one of the I'm not going into a lot of detail because it would be really long if I told the
Mm-hmm.
story of DMT. Uh, but one of the realizations I had was precisely that I was able to remember, recall that experience of that I was not deaf when I went to my mom, that I was going into also another type of sip into a hair, and I was burning through that body. So it's really interesting that you were telling me this, because it's just exactly what I it's not something I dream, it's something I experience with DMTs, the information I recollect from there,
Mm-hmm.
but it's the same thing. And I also, for me, it's really different the way I usually have trips with DMT. I mean, now it's completely like, now it's totally another level, because it's not that I have a trip out, is the trip comes in and it just moves through me. It's not anymore
Yeah,
that I go
yeah.
to another place. Um, Unless I really want to. Uh, but yeah, I just found really fascinated when I try to understand my origins, um, and about imaginary friends. I remember that I always felt myself as two beings in one body,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really interesting for me because when I started with hormones, I started to feel how I was shifting to the other. Uh,
And when did you make that decision, Nyx, to actually go with the hormones and start transitioning? What and how did you make that decision? I'm just really curious because it's such a monumental change,
yeah,
and it's
yeah, I did.
it that that's a commitment at that point.
So mm, I I was really afraid at the time about the trans people in general. I think at the time I was myself quite LGBT phobic, like transphobic and homophobic, um, because deeply inside myself, is what I was, but I was receiving so much rejection from outside, and I was trying to put so much effort to please others, that I was not allowing myself to fully be myself. And one thing that was really important, of course, was the contact of psychologics. The first contact I had, it was with 21. First MDMA. I mean, MDMA is not a psychedelic, but it really opens you. And then acid. But and also I did my first Vipassana when I was 20. That actually was a really interesting experience. This never happened later on meditation in the same way. But after I finished that retreat, I had through meditation the experience of I started to feel out of my body, and I started to feel part of the suffer of this planet. And then I remember to cry so much and being so scared also about like what the fuck is going on. And I remember that after that experience I closed myself completely about continue meditating, but later I did. But before going there, the way I accepted myself as transgender, and I decided to transition. First, it was through having people in my life, especially I will say Liz, a really good friend that is also autistic and trans, that opened to me a new way of accepting myself, because it was the first time in my life I was finding someone that it was not running away from me when I was sewing myself. And I was start to take layers of this onion. And so when we had MDMA trip together, and Liz asked to me how I was feeling about my gender, it just come out from me. I was not resistant, because I was not having any fear about it, and I just say it. I never feel as a boy. I always feel as a woman, but I don't know what to do. And then Liz told me, well, maybe you can try hormones. After that trip, it took me like 1 year to jump to that decision, because I was having at the time also a quite important company. I raised €500,000 at the time, and I was on Forbes in the magazine Forbes.
Really?
Price, yes. Before transition, actually. It's so funny, like if I can send you later the photo, because I was not giving a fuck about how I was dressing, and I was having my pants completely broken and just going with a t-shirt, and everyone, it was like really dressed and really, and I was receiving a prize of being like one of the 30 under 30, like 30 persons under 30 years of most, yeah. But anyway, like for me, that was like a lot of masking. I was moving myself at a time in an ambience where people, they were completely holding themselves to create this appearance, this mask. And what really happens is my first breakthrough with DMT, because after my third Vipassana, I just realized that my ego, the ego I constructed and in from the root, it was made with the idea that I was worthy of love only through what I was doing for others. It was completely blocking like my capacity to take this love directly to myself. So it doesn't matter how much I was trying, it was completely blocked. And then through that Vipassana 10 days course, the third that I did, I fully understood that the only way to go out of that, it was killing myself. To kill, not my body. But I was not knowing anything about how to do it, honestly. And this made me really, really depressed at the time. I had a really strong crisis. And then after like 2 months of having this crisis, and it was continuing, of course, my sister saw me a video about a porn star in Spain that started to give bufo to people and the experience that have this person with bufo. And when I saw his video and he was describing how he just become the full assistance and he was able to feel this infinite love for every part of himself and just completely unlock this to himself, I was like, wow, really, this exists. And of course, like one part of me was like, okay, I'm really scared about to do such a thing, but other part was like, oh my goodness, I really want to go through that. Then I started to research a little bit, and then a friend told me that had DMT. And at the time, I thought the DMT and bufo was the same thing,
Right.
because I have bufo, 5 mg DMT, yeah, just the same thing.
Yeah.
People the same, right? Like they have this crazy experience. So I thought, yeah, sure. But I don't know, I don't feel prepared, you know. But anyway, I was having this sensation inside myself. Yes, I really want to go there, to this place, to see my friends, and then I will see if I feel it or not. And somehow I was preparing myself. Like I remember doing a microdose of acid, then taking candy flip like acid with MDMA there. That was really helpful actually, for realizing that it was fine to allow myself to go through.
Mm-hmm.
And then my friend took me, me and another 2 friends. Liz was with me also there. To a little half-constructed cabin next to a lake in a forest. It was so beautiful. And then she gave to us DMT. And then nothing happened at all. And she was like, wait, I'm giving to you a huge amount. Why is nothing happening? And I was like, I don't know. But nothing was happening. And at some point I started to feel like this peace, this really awareness, but it was just that, you know. And then I had like inside myself like this kind of clue, like, no, Nyx, this is not something is going to happen just by taking it. You really want to go for it. If you want to have it, you really need to go for it. And then I really thought that it was enough for that day. But next day, I had a crazy deja vu, really big deja vu sensation. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
About that was the moment. That day I was going to die.
Mm-hmm.
It was so clear. So clear. And I remember asking to my friend to take the MT, and she said to me that she was not going to be there, that if I wanted to do it, I was going to do it by myself. And then I took the tool. I did the first 2 hits. I remember everything was like vibrating on me. And then I went to the third one to hold in as much as possible, completely sure that this was my end, that it was not coming back from this. And then I remember to go to a kind of a black space. I was just thinking like, well, it seems that nothing is happening because I have my eyes closed. But I was starting to feel like 360 degrees, this black space around me.
Yeah.
And then I started to see some kind of 2-dimensional drawings that felt at the beginning like something like a cross or something like that. And I was like, is this something my mind is making? What is exactly this? What is going on? And then I started to see around me like some also two-dimensional beings that they were looking at me around. And I was just looking at them and thinking, wait, what are they? And then as soon as I just asked myself this question, I just saw it. I just fully understand that every of these beings that I was seeing, it was the connection through every information I had. So one was my vision, the other was my appetite, the other was the voice of my head, all this information was just surrounding me. And I looked to all of them. They felt a little, I had this sensation, they were feeling like, hey, you should not been able to see this. and then I asked myself, wait, but if I am neither of these things, if I'm not my thoughts, if I'm not the visions I have or the sensation I have in my body, then who I am? Mm-hmm. If I'm neither of anything of this. And then I was looking everywhere. I was like, oh, I'm just who is observing. I'm just this present moment. And then I just completely break the place. And I was just completely accessing to this infinite light, this love towards all myself. And then suddenly I was in a white room. I was not anymore remembering anything of who I was. I completely cut all the chains towards all these concepts of who I was. I was just knowing that I was, and that was all. And I was in this room, and it was this kind of door in front of me. There was nothing inside. It was just a square and inscriptions around. And then between that door and me, it was kind of type of technology or something like that. And it was projecting a hologram. And this hologram was a human clown dancing in front of me. And then I looked at it, and as I was looking, I was putting my attention, I started to download in myself that I have a body, that I am alive. And then I started to feel my hands, and I started to open my eyes. And as soon as I was doing this, I started to just scream and just coming back. But I didn't get my memories. I was not able to have any language. Actually, that was also really interesting that when I came, I was having a completely different language that now I don't remember. That was not English, was not Spanish. I don't know what it was. But I felt myself completely as a baby that just born in a body of, at the time, 24 years old. And all the memories of the past of the person I was, of that ego, just completely disappeared. I was not having anymore any type of connection to my family or to my friends. I was not knowing who they were. Mm-hmm. And then I don't want to go for really long into a lot of details. One of the things that happened is that at some point I started to being able to speak. I think it was probably after 3 hours, something like that. I was able to speak as English, but not accessing to that memories. And one of the things I was knowing, I was completely knowing, it was that who I was, that I was just this present moment, and I was having this immense love of just being. And and I was just feeling so fucking grateful of just feeling. And when my friend after seeing me crying, he was quite high on ketamine in that moment. He asked me about, yeah, this was really weird because I didn't say anything, but he asked me about my name. And then I was knowing that I was no one. So I told to him Nemo, because Nemo means no one. From Nemo actually came Nyx, but that is another story. And then I reconnect with the memories of when I was a baby, like less than 1 year old, and to the moment where my parents, they were putting me into this little cage for babies, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they just leaving me there and not listening when I was crying and crying, and my father was really jealous about me somehow. It was not allowing my mother to take care of me, and my mother was also having this issue about eating disorder. So she was not eating almost anything, and she was not feeding me, and I was really, really weak. And I was processing this trauma when I come back. I remember crying so much. But after I get rid of that, I was not. I never felt anymore my parents are my parents, or my friends are my friends. Actually, I was need to build again that relation, and it was really weird also when I come back to Spain, because everything was looking completely different, and I didn't gain completely my memories until I think it took me like around 2 years for gaining all memories.
Really?
Of who I was supposed to. Yes.
Yeah.
It was a really long time to. And also in that period, I was the dysphoria. I was starting to be aware of the dysphoria of my body. It came back, this also, that I was not able to recognize my body. And then I was just having it really clear. I don't give a fuck about what I was doing. I didn't care about the company I was having at all. I was not caring about anything. I was just wanted to be alive and be myself. So I just did it. I just organized everything. I went to the medic, and I want to do this, and I just allowed myself to do it. And it was fucking amazing. Like, I was just feeling how my brain suddenly was having the hormones at once, and then I was just increasing my capacity to perceive inside and connect with others also through changing hormones. And also just start to feel my own skin as part of me, because this is one of the things that happen with dysphoria. Like, it makes your body to don't being able to recognize itself as part of itself. I don't know how to go into more detail up to that and saying that, because it's
it sounds very difficult to describe what this sensation is really like.
I can actually, I think it's actually a substance that can actually make you to have similar feeling, and I think it's ketamine. So imagine to be constantly on ketamine, not really high dose, but constantly, and not being able to ground yourself. And when I started with estrogens, I was started to feel this, how I was grounding myself. And as soon I also had a genital surgery, I also started to feel that I was able to ground with my sexual energy and being able to connect that way with others and with myself. It was so amazing to suddenly being able to experience to have an orgasm, because before I was not able to really. It was completely disconnected, this energy of me.
Wow.
Yeah. And that is the same with my face, by the way. That is the reason I'm doing this fundraising, because I don't recognize from this part from my nose to here, this area. I recognize my eyes and this part, but I cannot this part. And this actually makes me that when I'm seeing my reflection, or even yeah, just by touching myself, it feels like I'm not fully in myself. And it's quite weird because I even perceive these in completely really high states of consciousness. This is not something goes away by itself. It doesn't matter how much I love myself, because it's not about that. Actually, it's the opposite. As much more I love myself, more I allow myself to accept what I'm feeling and accept that is something I want to change. And I just want to fully embody myself completely. I want to have that experience in my life. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that honestly, that for myself, I mean, I just take it for granted that I've never had any of these kinds of sensations or feelings that you're describing. So I can, project about how to relate to that. But I have no personal basis for that. Though, I've done ketamine, like, is that my hand? Who's, are these my legs? So maybe just a little bit in that sense. And also, tripping on mushrooms, like, whoa, what the hell are these things? You're looking at your hands and whoa, that kind of thing. But such a profound journey you've just described here, from kind of with the Vipassana and the fear that arose from that, and the feeling of suffering, and then the MDMA experience, and then talking with your friend and being asked the question, and kind of that opening up within you, and then turning to DMT, mistakenly being inspired by Bufo. And it's funny, I mean, even I kind of thought we were beyond this at this point, but even the other day, I'm joined up at these different groups on Facebook. I don't ever really participate in groups. I don't, I'm just not into that kind of thing. But I saw somebody wrote a post just saying, is 5-MeO DMT the same as DMT? And I was like, haven't we cleared this one up already? I mean, come on now. You really need to go on Facebook to ask that question? That we should all know that by now. But, even back when I first started talking about 5-MeO DMT, people would try and correct me. And they'd say, you mean DMT? I was like, no, I'm not talking about DMT. 5-MeO DMT. It's different. Learn about it. But anyway, I'm just fascinated that within your own experience here, that you were first introduced to DMT, and it's one of these things that's just so fascinating that it's never just the dose. That's some people get really obsessive about, well, you got to have the right dose for the right person, and it's never that. So you're first introduced to it, and basically nothing's happening. Nothing's happening because there's something in you that says, I haven't made the decision yet. And then when you decided the next day, like, okay, this is my day to die, not physically, but to go through this death process, that then when you were internally ready, the same DMT produces this really profound effect. And honestly, this is one of the most profound results I've ever heard of. I've heard of people like losing the capacity for language temporarily. And also on 5-MeO DMT, I did meet a woman who said that she lost the ability to speak for a couple of years, and it took her a while before she could use language again. But that you got kind of that result. It's one thing for people to take DMT and then, kind of this glossolalia gibberish stuff that comes out, sort of this energy language, I just like to call it. But then to have completely forgotten your own history, yet reconnected with your early childhood, and then really finding within that as you're rebuilding yourself and rediscovering yourself, and the joy and the pleasure of just being, because that's, when people ask, well, what's the purpose of the whole damn thing, right? It's just to be, obviously. That's all that God is doing, is just being through all of us. So that's the point. There's no greater point than that, that that's really it. So you were able to embody that. And then through this expression of self love for yourself that you're now really experiencing, you're making the decision to transition. You're making the decision to go to the hormones, to have the sexual reconstruction surgery, and to really embrace yourself. And now, as you're saying, even you want to go a little bit further with your face to really be the person that you feel that you are, and that it's all done. I think sometimes people on the outside of transgender existence might think that it's actually an expression of maybe self-hatred or self-loathing or just dissatisfaction with their identity. But here you're really describing it as this process of, this is the way for you to show yourself that you love yourself, is to undergo this transformation. And it's just profound. It's really beautiful. And that, as an example, that this is what self-love can look like. This is what being true to yourself can look like. And the joy and the pleasure you feel at being the person you are becoming and have been becoming and are, it's just beautiful. This is a conversation unlike any I've ever had here on the podcast. So it's really fantastic to hear all of these things. During that time period when you weren't able to connect with those memories, and of course, psychologists tell us that that's a big part of our identity, is our memories of who it is that we remember ourselves as being. And so to kind of have them removed kind of, I think for some would probably be extremely disturbing and scary, yet you seem to have embraced it. But was that scary for you to not have that sense of, this is my mom, this is my dad, this is my history, this is what I've been through, but rather just focused on, I'm being now, and I'm making decisions for myself? That, like the woman that I mentioned before that said that she lost the ability to use language for like 2 years or so. She said it was terrifying, that she was very ungrounded through the whole thing. But it doesn't sound like that for you. So how was that? Did it feel freeing? Was it scary? Was it both of those things?
So the first thing that happened is that I recognize my friend who asked to me my name as my father. Because also at some point when I was crying, I wanted to ask him something. I was like, can, but I was not able to put the words into. This was quite later, after I started to reprocess and I started to have language. And then, as I say, he was quite high on ketamine, and he just completed the phrase that was, yes, I can be your father. And then I just completely finished this crying and this feeling completely whole and in peace with myself. But later, when he got out of the trip of ketamine, he kind of realized that for his ego, this was not right. And then when I was having this kind of baby mind at a moment. And for me, it was like, okay, yes, this is my place. This is my house. This is where I live. Not in Spain. But then I just saw that this was not happening. I just saw that they actually wanted to me coming back to Spain. And then my friend told me, hey, you just need time Just give it to yourself, at least 1 month, and just go. But for me, that was fucking traumatic. So I was recognizing him as my father, and I was feeling completely abandoned.
Yeah.
So actually, what I cleaned it with DMT, from completely any type of aversion of craving, I just started to again put it in myself. And it was actually the same thing. It was just this loneliness, especially the main thing that I had been going through. So when I come back to Spain, apart that everything was looking completely different. Like when I was looking to a car and I was receiving information from my brain, like, oh, how cars should look, it was not compatible at all. It was like, this is information completely different. It was really weird experience to look at everything this way.
Yeah.
And then when my sister came to me, because I didn't want to meet anyone, I was like just by myself, just enjoying of being, just having this. I'm just here and just enjoying. But when my family started to interact and they started to get worried about why I was not talking to them at all, then my sister came to see me, and it was really obvious when she saw me. She just know it. I didn't need to say anything because I was just not feeling her as my sister. I was just seeing a stranger. And for me, what I was afraid of, what was really making me afraid of, it was that the person that I was, it come back. That the energy that others, especially energy that others were putting on me, that their judgment, their perspective about who I was, that can have the power to actually turn me back. That was really making me super scared. So I was actually putting a lot of effort to that to not happen. And actually, I think one of the most crazy things I did, and so my uncle, my uncle was working at the time as a policeman anti-drugs. Okay. My family was really scared in general about substances, especially because two of his brothers died because heroin. After that, my uncle just went to work as a lawyer, but he had a lot of experience as a policeman, anti-drugs, like national police in Spain. And I just decided to take him to the forest, like around 1 or 2 weeks later, and this happened, and I was in Spain. And I just told him what happened to me. And before he said to me anything, I say to him, I believe this can be also really beneficial for you, because you had 4 car accidents in just 1 month, and your son tried to commit suicide. He was in a really bad moment in his life. And then this was super interesting when he replied to me. He said to me that he had a dream where I was telling to him this.
Yeah.
And then I told him, hey, like, you want to do this pilgrim route, like just pilgrimage of just walking for weeks to Santiago Compostela. You want to do this with me? Why we don't rent a house in north of Portugal? And then if you feel it, because this is completely your choice, I don't want to push this on you, we can have this. I can give you DMT. But it doesn't need to happen, I will just reserve everything, and then after that we will just go to do the pilgrim route, to walk together. He said, well, okay, yeah, if it's not any compromise of taking this, yes, I agree about this. So this was also really intense period for me. It was just 1 month where I was feeling fucking scared about going again to a breakthrough with DMT. Because I die with it, I was like, how I will just go again. But I was feeling inside myself really deeply that if I wanted to do such a thing with my uncle, that one of the reasons that my uncle was so important is because he was the most influenced person in my family, the person that had more influence through everyone else. And in Spain, usually this family really stuck together. They're really usually doing everything together.
Yeah.
So I was knowing that if he was changing, my family fully will change. And I was feeling that that was the path through being able to make my space through the person that I was now.
Mm-hmm.
So I first of all, I started to prepare everything for myself. I started to try DMT. I was not able to have any breakthrough. I was really, really scared about it. So it doesn't matter how much I was doing, again, it was not working.
Yeah.
And then one day, I thought, well, maybe I can mix with acid. Maybe that can help. I had this intuition inside myself. So I took acid. I think it was probably 1.5 cups, something like that. I don't know, maybe 200 UGs. And then on it, I took a bunch of DMT. I was really feeling that was just the moment. I was not feeling anxious about it, and I just completely surrendered. I went to the same room, the same white room with another hologram, but this time the hologram, instead of being a human clown, it was two squares, one like horizontal and the other vertical together. And then as I was looking at this, I was just downloading that I was the full planet, that I was just everyone. And then I just started to cry so much, of feeling how much war I did to myself, how much just like all the suffer I was having. And yeah, after that, I was feeling myself prepared. And then we went to the cabin. We were not, really thinking at the beginning of doing anything. I told to him, if you want to do it, you need to say to me. I don't going to insist to you. I don't going to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then he said to me one time, ignored, another 2 times, and then I was okay. Yeah, let's do it. Just allow that to happen. And then I decided to start first with MDMA. Well, before going to MDMA, I give to him a microdose, and he never tried any psychedelic before. And he was like, wow, how I can see the flap of the birds in the air, and how I can listen to all the bees. And he was like, what the fuck is going on? And I was like, you're just increasing your consciousness. And he was like, wow, I really want to do it. And I was okay, but let's first start with MDMA. I was feeling myself, I want to be really sure that this is going to be well. And also, I was fucking scared myself, of course, about it.
Yeah.
What's going on. And also I wanted to talk with him some stuff, like he had a really kind of right background. Like he was quite machist and homophobic and really close-minded in general. So when we were on MDMA, apart that we talk a lot about many things, one of the things I did, it was coming out as transgender. And I remember on MDMA, his face, that was scared of it. And I was like, wow, I really feel glad that I'm telling you this on MDMA. And then I give it to him. And he was out for 20 minutes, which is not normal at all on DMT.
Yeah.
And I started to be a little scared, like, oh wait, what is going on? So I decided to also take DMT to
check in on him. Yeah.
And I remember the trip I had was one of the most weirdest in the sense that it was the most normal thing I ever saw. I was just in front of two human girls just playing. They were just playing with their hands. And I was like, wait, this is DMT or is it just that I'm another scene? And then I just opened my eyes and then everything was really different, like with so much detail that I never experienced this. I remember seeing the skin of my ankle covered everywhere with the flower of life. Um, and then I was just knowing it. I just went close to him and I hugged him and I told him, I need you here and I love you. And then he opened his eyes. I remember looking at his face. It was completely looking different, like this person. It was like I'm looking to a different person. Mm-hmm. And then he told me that he understood. And I remember being so scared that I was like, I don't want to know now. But then later, he told me that he experienced himself as everyone in this planet, and that the huge amount of compassion he was feeling for everyone and for himself, completely clean himself. And we started the Pilgrim Road. I remember also doing to him like a political test, just curious about like, oh, how do your ideas change it? And I felt so funny, so interesting that he was not anymore scared about the typical things about losing private property or state controlling. So he turned from having a lot more perspective of like right view to be a lot more into left, almost anarchist view. And I remember knowing that when he was going to come back home, like he was not going to be recognized. He didn't lose himself, in the sense that he didn't reset completely himself. But I felt like, that actually happened. Like when I finished the Pilgrim Road, just the same day I just finished, my grandmother died. By the way, another thing that was just as a information that is really random, one of the things that happened during this trip that was happening in the cabin is that one bird entered through the window and sit next to us. I was looking during like full hour or more next to us. And we were like, what the fuck?
The bird wanted to see what was going on, huh?
Yes. But when he came back, his wife was like, "Who are you?
Yeah,
I don't recognize you." And then he put his arms on her and he'd say, "You don't remember me when we meet each other when we were 14 years old." And she just started to cry and cry, and I was like, "How is this possible? How you clean so much yourself that you went to that place?" And yeah, of course, this completely shifted my family, the relation. Like after that, my sister, my dad, my mom was interested to take DMT, and they take actually DMT. They didn't have any type of transformation, nothing compared to this, but it was actually really helpful for me to take MDMA with my mom.
Yeah.
Reconnect with her, and also she was able to accept me as transgender, because also she was completely not understanding and rejecting me in that sense. Yeah.
So to me, this sounds like these are the roots then of your chosen style of practice of integrating MDMA with 5-MeO and also DMT, that this follows your own path for your own personal experience and how you learned how to work with these medicines with other people to really heal the dynamic that's within your family. And of course, all coming out of this place of self-love for yourself, of your own new transition into a new identity, and then the ripples that are going out through your family because of that. And it's a really beautiful, profound story. So when did you go beyond your family into serving other people? And also, when did you have your first experience with 5-MeO? And then kind of get into that realm. But if I'm making you skip ahead, you're welcome to keep telling the story here.
No. It's perfect. Um, so well, after 6 months of transition with hormones, I was feeling so much in myself, so free.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I wanted to prove to which point I was able to go with it. So I did 2 times more the Pilgrim Road. I went again to Vipassana this time. That was actually really weird because, Vipassana actually divides between gender, like male and female,
Yeah.
and I really try to say to convince them that they allow me to go to the female when I was 6 months of hormone therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And the teacher was there. Was like, no way, you can't. And then what actually happened is that um, at the end they allow me to go to one that was at Satipatthana. That is, yeah, it's quite interesting for me how they were describing a really similar experience that I had, like this total dissolution and realization about who you are truly,
Mm-hmm.
of how you achieve that through meditation. And I was feeling really happy actually. Like I remember experience first time retrieval vipassana. It was my fourth that I was doing, in total peace and being able also to challenge myself more and going farther. And I think it's because when I was doing it before, I was feeling really strong this physical dysphoria of my body towards itself.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, I just wanted to travel. I just wanted to know the world. So I just sell almost everything I was having. I stopped to pay the rent I was having. Well, at the time I was still the CEO of this company. So I was receiving the money. I was just having meetings online, but I just started travel around the world. I just went first to um, I remember to Sweden and then to Russia, uh, and meeting like a friend that I was there, and then Thailand, Japan, the States, Mexico. I think I was in total like around 6 months until I started to worry a lot about how much I was bleeding through my ass. I was not understanding it, like what
Mm-hmm.
was going. And then I come back to Spain, like, okay, I want to check what is going on. And then in Spain, yeah, I I just continued traveling. I didn't set myself in a specific place. Um, and then I just know through what I was traveling, uh, how dysphoric I was feeling about my genitals, how my transition was not complete. I was like just having this realization. It was like, hey, no, this is actually not ended. You need to go through a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I was experiencing all this freedom, but also realization that I was still having stuff to do. And then my mom at the time was having some money from selling the house because we split, my father and her, and she decided to help me to pay the surgery for like the genital surgery. And then when I was recovering from it, COVID happened. Um, it was just in the right moment that the lockdown in Spain was happening. It was in the different meetings I was having for close funding for the company, and they were completely denied, blocked, and it was the end for the company. Um, And then so I also in that process I spent almost anything, all the money almost that I had, and it was just because my mom that I was able to to have a place at the time, especially recovering from the surgery. It was really hard. I was almost 4 months in bed without being able to go out of it. And
Because
yeah,
that's not a minor surgery to have a genital transformation surgery. I can't even imagine.
yeah. Actually, it went wrong, and one of the nights I was in a hotel. I was bleeding so much that I was able to hold the blood between my arms because it was like coagulous, and I was feeling how I was losing the consciousness. And I remember going naked to the entrance of the hotel and just collapsed there. And then ambulance came to me and take me. And then I just woke up in the middle of the night in a room that was emergency room, but they forgot to put enough amount of anesthesia, and I was just screaming of pain. And then later, one of the things that happened that was also really horrifying was that it happened again, that I started to bleed after recovering, like after almost 10 days of that. And then they took me again, but instead of putting me in the hospital, they decided to try to have surgery on me in a clinic. And they put local anesthesia. And one of the things they didn't know is that usually local anesthesia, it doesn't work really well for autistic people. So I was not feeling it. And they were really sure that I would not feel it, but I was completely feeling what they were doing on me. And they started to open me, and they started to ask me to don't move. And I was just screaming and crying, and they were like, what the fuck? And at some point, I don't know how much it was, but they stopped it, and then they just sent it back to me to the hospital. And that was really traumatic. I was need to do a lot of work to recover from that during the quarantine. I was working a lot with mushrooms, acid, and DMT for that. But I went out of that trauma, and then I was really sure that my life was going to be in the North Europe. I was really focused on Sweden because I was feeling Sweden as my home, because it was there where this happened, what I was telling you before about having my second born, of June of 2017. But then one of the things I experienced is that I was openly saying to the organizations that I was transgender. And almost all organizations I was saying that I was transgender, they were not even talking to me. This is one of the things usually happens in Spain, but I didn't know this was also in Sweden. Around 89% of trans people, they don't have access to work because they get rejected. And half of trans people, they commit suicide because how much rejection they get from society. So yeah, at some point I just stopped to say it, that I was trans, and then I started to get replies from them. But I was feeling that was wrong, that not saying fully my history, that was that part really important for myself. And at some point I saw a solicitude from Isen for work in our organization for climate change. They call themselves Worldwide Friends. And I just copy-paste the profile. I didn't put any effort because my intention was going to Sweden. But then they were the only ones that say to me, hey, Nyx, we want you. And I was like, what? I was like, yeah, we want you here in 4 days. Just take a flight to here. And I was like, okay, I'm going. I guess I'm going. I mean, I was not having even money for paying a flight to go there, so I was like really excited, like, come on, Iceland. And then when I arrived, I just discovered that it was completely corrupt organization. They give me a toilet for sleeping, and they were using people for cleaning houses.
Wow.
Not, yes, and I was quite trapped there actually. Um, and I was really glad that I took with me some acid, and then I started to do microdosing. And at some point, I also learned to pick mushrooms here in Iceland. Um, and it was through the microdosing I was doing and just maintaining connected to myself that I was able to not fall in total depression, start to meet people. I was knowing that the most important thing for me was to connect with the people here around. And my plan actually was to work as a chef or as a teacher of programming or something, design, something like that. That was my idea. But then I meet now a good friend that I live with actually, a person at a time that offered to me to do the MT like after like 1 or 2 weeks that I was in Iceland, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. I mean, it's not really common that someone like randomly offers to you the MT,
Right.
but sure, let's do it. And then what I saw on this trip, it was like people of Iceland. They were having so much appreciation towards me, and they were asking me that that making this place my home, that this was my home, that I just need to feel it. And this made me to have so much peace and start to believe that it was a reason that I was here for. Um, and at some point, I found friends that they helped me to go out of the situation that I was. They gave me a really, really cheap place to live. And I actually received at some point the help of now my ex-partner. Uh, and I was not paying anything, and I was able to start to search for work. And I was really trying really hard. Like I really want to work as a chef or as a teacher, as I was saying. But then I was also feeling how much I wanted to have some DMT for myself. So at the end, I decided to just find a way to get it by myself without buying anything. Just you know.
Mm-hmm.
um, and then the first time I had it in my hands, and I smoked it. Um, I saw like kind of a alien elf goddess that was showing to me the planet Earth and was pointing to Iceland and was saying to me, "Here, Nyx, you're going to help me to raise the conscience of this planet, and this is what we're going to do. You're going to work with the MT here with people." And then when I go out of that trip, after 1 or 2 days, randomly, one person come to me and say to me, "I want to pay you to have a session with DMT with you."
Mm-hmm.
I was like, what? And after that person, a lot of people start to come and come and come and come, and I'm just doing that here. It's not something I was just looking for. It just came to me.
Yeah.
Literally, that is what I'm doing. I'm not doing anything else. It's just I'm getting everything from there today, and I already been here 1 year and a half. And yeah, what I can say, I feel so fucking glad of learning so much, going through so much, and of course, it was not easy at all. It's still not always easy. Um, but before arriving to that place, you were asking me about how I got 5 male, how I found it. So, um, during this period that I had that experience with DMT, in the next 2 months, it happened a lot of things. One thing is, my I broke with my girlfriend. It was really traumatic, broke actually, and the way it happened. I don't go now in details about that, but it was quite traumatic, and that trauma led me to try first time the mix of mushrooms with DMT.
Mm-hmm.
And I did it to 21. I was actually this line of planet. I don't know. I was just feeling it was that day. And I had experience of DMT that it goes completely beyond of anything I read that can happen with DMT. Well, first I was taking, I did 2 little trips with a small amount, and I was going into my ship. I was just seeing a full reality as something out of myself, and I was able to just look at what things was connecting to me, to this reality, and I was able to just change it and correct in what way I would like to feel about it. And also downloading information. That was the second time. But the third time was just, what? I just absorbed it, and I just saw this how this Earth was pointing with these 2 planets to a certain place, and I just started to every cell of my body was just absorbing new information, and when all my body was just knowing what was going on. I just started to shapeshift. But I'm going to try to describe this as better as possible. So the first thing I started to feel was my back, my bones. They started to crack and open up every vertebra until my head. And then I felt how my eyes, they were changing. I was able to see reality in a different way. I was feeling also like how they were becoming bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And I was feeling like kind of here 2 wings, like they were vibrating in this area. And then I did the same also, crack completely my arm, my legs. And at some point, I felt that it was like 2 things in front of me. So I just took it and I just break it out. And it was like 2, I can describe it as 2 winds. I don't know how to describe it. I feel how I was completely breaking my chrysalida. My ego was like, what the fuck is going on? You know, what? But my ego was not anymore in control of this body. And then I was feeling myself completely as this kind of hybrid alien form. I don't know how to describe it. I don't know how to say it. But it was really, really obvious. And after that, after that, I was in that state for I was in that state around 3-4 days, and then slowly my ego come back. But just by connecting with my hands, just putting my attention on them, I was able to open again that space and connect in that way to that part of myself. And then a really, really old friend that I found myself, because this was like around 11 years old, something like that. So it was before the death I had with DMT. I found myself that I was still having a lot of craving towards this person. And I was really surprised. I just saw it, I discovered it around end of the year. And then I just decided to, like really intuitive way. I usually don't use weed, but that day I was like, I need to smoke weed and go into meditation. And I went there to look at where this was coming from. And then I started to go through all fears, like just feeling, accepting. At some point, I was going also without any problem, the fear of dying. And then at some point, this this came to me completely, that break me completely out of the meditation. That was the fear of being alone.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, wow, I have this. I still have this thing. What I can do with this. And then after some days, I just decided, okay, I'm going to take a proper amount of DMT and ask for help, like what I should do. And then I completely break through. I went completely to realms of DMT, and I was just, okay, I want to ask for this, what I should do. And then the answer of DMT was, Nyx, do Buffo. And I was like, okay, so and one drug is saying to me, now go to the other. So I was like, okay, yeah, but I'm fucking scared of Buffo because I had one experience before with it, and I remember like how I was connecting with it to the moment of when I was 12 years old, that I was I got poisoned, and I was really close to that at that age also, because of getting poisoned. Yeah, I had actually multiple near that experience through my body, like dying my body actually, but the truth. And then when I was knowing that was the answer, and I was like, why? But okay, I accepted. And then I was like, yeah, but I can accept this, but come on, like, who is going to come in Iceland? Is not almost anyone that they're going to have Buffo, But I as soon as I accepted, a friend write to me like, hey, it's a here shaman with Buffo. Will you like to do something with this person? I was like, well, what the fuck? And I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to talk with him. Yeah, but for sure it's going to be like in a month or something like that. For sure have a lot of people. And he said to me, hey, Nyx, you can come tomorrow. And I was like, no, this is too much. This is too fast. Come on. So I said to him, and please just give me a list. Give me a list 1 week or 4 days, 5 days, something like that. And he was like, yeah, sure. And then I started to search on internet, okay, how I can prepare myself for this. I was knowing a little about you before, just a little bit, but that was the first time that I was like, oh, wow, actually Martin have a lot of work on about this. I think it can be so helpful for me to, to go through this. And I remember reading your book, the Intelligent Liberation, and just having a process with itself with the book. I was not need to take anything. I remember like I also had a dream of myself like calling to my room and opening, and it was just myself. I was just looking to myself, and I was saying, Nyx, I just came to kill you. And I was like, no, wait, I don't. And I was like, but anyway, I know that you are me, so I'm just going to open the door. And then I opened the door and just killed myself in the dream. So when I went to the shaman, I really went through I remember vomiting before starting the session.
Yeah.
And then I told him, hey, I'm autistic, usually need a lot more than the usual other people. And this is also common because autistic people have more EMT and more 5-MeO in their brains. So he gave me a month at the beginning saying like, yeah, this is going to be enough for you feeling it. And I was like, I don't feel anything. And he was like, okay, here the dose, the proper dose. And I was like, oh yeah, yes, I feel something. And he was like, okay, it seems that you are hard.
Yeah.
Let's give a really big dose. And he gave me 2 pipes because it was not enough space in one. It was with Buffo, that is quite big than 5 men, of course.
Yeah.
And then when I did it properly, I remember my ego looking at my body and just like, oh wow, this is it's not affecting me. It's just my body moving by itself and doing things. Um, and I remember that was my first experience with Bufo. And I remember how after that I was just feeling so much capacity to express myself and to be. But still, after like around a month or something like that of that, I was feeling like, oh wait, I'm not completely clean. I just realized it. Because how I reacted towards the rejection of other people, of
Mm-hmm.
allowing myself to show myself. And then there is where I decided to go out for myself, I mail, and then I started to use it. I remember that the first time I had the experience of my ego completely dissolving, it was in the volcano of Iceland. It was still active, and I decided to put in a pipe that I have, electrical pipe, DMT with Bufo. And I tried before that combination, but one of the things that happened is that I was so hypnotized with the lava that was around me that when I took it and I was just looking to the lava, I just allowed myself completely to go. And I was remembering just becoming completely light and having this feeling of just being light as weight as light, as heavy as light.
Yeah.
There was nothing more, anything else than that. And I remember when I come out, it was a little earthquake, and then the mountain was moving, and I was like, "Wow, this is so fucking, I don't know, awesome." Actually, like I was just so impressed of how things were going, and and after that, um, I just still realized that I was still things to work on myself. But I started to try like, oh, like, okay, let's give to people that usually wear Buffo and see how they go with it. But still I was not um, prepared really for giving it. It was more experimenting actually in that sense. With actually, I don't feel it was right because I don't think it's right to work with anyone. I mean, unless is consent. And I feel it was consent in the sense that they were knowing that I was not having experience with Bufo, but still, um, yeah, I don't feel that it was that right thing to do at the time, but I did it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
So, Nyx, I'm really enjoying this conversation, and unfortunately, at this point, I am going to need to wrap us up because I have a consultation coming up in about 10 minutes. But I think that this is a good place to bring it to a conclusion for now. But I would like to say that I would really enjoy having you back on again sometime relatively soon, and then we can talk about actually stepping into serving and what your method and style is and all of that because we haven't really gotten to that today. But there's just been so much that you have shared along in your own story and your own process. And I just want to thank you for being so open here and for sharing so much that is so intimate to you and your life and your experience. And I think it's just been fascinating to be able to receive that here for me to hear all of this from you. And I hope that the listening audience has really gotten something out of it as well. But I'm really glad that we had time to have this conversation today. And just thank you for your openness and everything that you've shared today. It's been very personal. And obviously, a lot of it has been very difficult. And there's been a lot of transformation in so many ways. And so thank you for being willing to share all of this and to be public and to really step into who you are. It's really quite beautiful, Nick. So thank you.
Thank you to you. I love you, Martin.
I love you too, Nyx.